Wonderful people, good day. How are you doing? Hope you're keeping safe and you're doing well. So, my name is Mercy Akugwa. We want to discuss gender based violence in Nigeria and the way out. This discussion really is one that I've always wanted to talk about. I've always wanted to, do something nice on this video. I've always on this topic, and it's something that is part of my, well, I say my passion because I'm passionate about women. I'm passionate about children. I'm passionate about young men and women who are going through violence in one way or the other. So I'm very great. I'm very happy to be discussing this um, topic today. So I just hope that we will learn one or two things from this video. Now, basically, I'm going to discuss about gender-based violence, the term, the definition, what it's all about, the various forms or the various types. Look at the causes, look at the effect. We'll also look at the possible ways, that the government or institutions can support to minimize the effect or eradicate it in its totality, gender-based violence in Nigeria. So let's get to it. Um, when you hear gender-based violence, it's just a collection of human rights violations, that's caused long-term injury, harm, psychological traumas, um, pains to its victims and survivors. You know, for our discussion, for short, I'll be calling gender-based violence GBV, which is also what is known as GBV. So when I mention GBV, I'm still talking about gender-based violence. It affects the life, it affects the health, it affects the well-being of millions of women, girls, boys, men all over the world. This is a global problem. It's a global menace. It is something that the whole world is fighting against. So it's not really peculiar to Africa and it's not peculiar to Nigeria. It's a challenge. And I know that a lot of things has been put in place to see, in this fight against GBV, that's gender-based violence. But we're lending our voice to it today to really understand the term, to understand what it's all about, to understand the legal framework and all of that. So whenever there's gender-based violence, it causes displacement, breakdown in family and community structure, conflict. Just for example, you see that the issue of Boko Haram has caused a lot of people to be internally displaced persons. And most of these people have suffered gender-based violence and they're no longer in the land of their birth, in the land of their nativity. They're just somewhere in a camp, starting off like in a resettlement, and their life has been shattered. It's not been easy picking up the pieces of your life, having suffered a whole lot from that. So it's still part of what we're discussing. So I'm just giving you an example to enable you to understand, when I say that gender-based violence causes displacement, it causes breakdown of family structure. Most of these people don't know where their parents are. That the children are living staying in one place. Well, the mother with three children, and she cannot really say where two of her children are. Or a father that is without the children. So this is an issue that is really worrisome. Is really really worrisome. So gender-based violence basically is defined as violence that is directed against a person because of the person's gender. You know, violence that is directed against the person based on their gender or sex. So it involves acts that inflict, just like I earlier said, physical, mental, sexual harm, psychological, harm, threats, you know, depravity of liberty, freedom of movement, and all of that. It's just a collection, of all these things. you know, Violence that is directed at the person because of the person's gender. But most especially, most in recent time, not in recent time though, it's often that gender-based violence affects me, majority of women and children. The percentage of women and children are higher than it pertains to the boys and the men. When gender-based violence happens, see that the boys or the men are co-opted into these armed forces, terrorist group, bandits, those armed groups, because that is where especially it affects this male folk. But basically, it targets more on men, the women, and the children. The effect on the female gender, for me, is quite higher than how it affects the male. Even though I'm not saying it doesn't affect the male, but the rate at which it affects the women and girls are higher. Now, gender-based violence comes in different forms. Yeah, it comes in different forms. This is a generic term that has a whole lot under it. Now, one of the forms it is, or one of the types of gender-based violence is sexual violence. Sexual violence, yes. Um, Under sexual violence, we talk about rape, whether attempted rape, threatened rape, talk about even marital rape, talk about sexual abuse, we talk about sexual exploitation. Under sexual violence, we talk about forced prostitution, transactional or survival sex. When there is gender-based violence, I mean, people are displaced. You see that it's an just like stories we hear in the IDPs that most of these women sleep with the soldiers in exchange for millet, in exchange for corn. This is survival sex, transactional sex, where they sell their bodies, young girls, they sell their body for what they can eat. It's that bad. So under sexual violence, we have sexual harassment, intimidation, and humiliation. So also another form of GBV is physical violence. Physical violence. We have heard stories of when these bandits, for example, in the Northeast attack these people, they used to maybe beat them up, kidnap them, and when they come back, or I don't know, they leave them with physical, pain because a lot of beating, a lot of they use the machetes on them and all of that. There have been stories, people have been maimed for life. Some people have lost their legs, arms, and some people also have some spinal injuries based on the violence they were exposed to. You know, um, when there was a raid in their place or when there was an attack, as it were. So under physical violence, like I earlier stated, we have physical assault, battery, slavery. Yes, you see, in Nigeria, it's becoming rampant over the years that these armed people, and call them bandits or terrorists, they go and kidnap people, and children, you will not hear about those children again. Till date, we've not been able to recover or for all the children, Chibok girls that were kidnapped to be released. Just some of them were released. So most of them become slaves to these people that are, holding them in captivity. So under physical violence, we have trafficking. You know, Nigeria, there has been a whole lot going on in respect of trafficking. Day in there, these trafficking circles are being exposed, and these girls are released. And when they come back and tell their stories, you have chills all over your body, and you wonder, did this really happen? People go through a lot with the promise of a better life. They end up becoming sex slaves, becoming her house help over, across maybe Libya or some other place. They go to serve and under very harsh conditions, and this was not what they were told. You know, so, or just because of what is happening, I've heard stories of where people ran away from their place, their villages, their town, their community because of Boko Haram invasion and all of that. We also have emotional or psychological violence. Emotional or psychological violence. Hmm. Emotional and psychological violence is very deep in the sense that sometimes you see people going through emotional and psychological violence and you might not know, you might think all is well with them, everything is going on well, but you don't know that deep down there something is missing and they are not there. They're just putting up a face that people say that it's fine, the person is okay, but deep down, let's get close to them, you know that something is missing in this person's life. And we'll talk about under emotional and psychological abuse, we'll talk about abuse and humiliation. Most of these women, men, boys, girls go through a lot of abuse, humiliation, insults, cruelty, where restrictions are placed on their liberty, freedom of movement. I've heard where a lady was trafficked, and where she was, she couldn't even move out, cannot do anything. After sleeping with her, they will lock her up in the room. The stories are mind blowing. Like, wow, can this really happen? And it's happening. So, this causes these people emotional, you know, traumas and sometimes they become psychotic you know. So we also have harmful traditional practices. Harmful traditional practices. Harmful traditional practices is a form of gender-based violence because it takes the form of female genital mutilation. It still happens. I wonder, what are we still in the olden days? You see where female children are taken to be mutilated, for their female genitals to be mutilated, all in the aim of I don't want her or I want her to be I don't want her to become a prostitute. I don't want her. Most people that practice this feel when these child genitals are mutilated, it will avoid, to make them to be chaste, it will make them not to love men or become wayward or all of that. But that is a cave, and it doesn't hold water. Rather, it exposes these female children to diseases, infection. Most of them end up not having, even giving birth because of these one or two infections, and it destroy their life. And rather than them becoming chaste, they will be worse. That would be the opposite. So, female genital mutilation or cutting, which is generally known as FGM, is one of the forms of gender-based violence. It still happens in Nigeria. It still happens. It still happens. Now, forced marriage. We hear stories of forced marriage. Uh, Men of over 70 years marrying children of 7, 12, 10, 8. You wonder what is still happening. It's still happening. Child marriage is under harmful traditional practices where people are in this area are known to marry very early. Child marriage, when a child doesn't even understand her left from the right, that's not to become a wife. You are just altering the person's life. So, child marriage is under harmful traditional practices and is a gender-based violence. Talk about dowry and honor killing. Some parts of Africa, they do this dowry and honor killing. Thinking for them is a traditional practice, but it's violence. Then sex selection abortion practices, where people, okay, I'm looking for a boy, and if it's a girl, I have to go and terminate the pregnancy. It's also part of gender-based violence. Talk about neglect and abuse, denial of education and economic opportunities. You see, in instances where people will say, okay, because you're a girl, you don't want to go and marry, your mates are married, you won't go to school, I will not train you, go and sort yourself out. You see children going on the street begging, doing a whole lot of child labor, all in a bid to survive. So these are forms of, harmful traditional practices, and it's gender-based violence. Now, another form of gender-based violence is socioeconomic violence. Socioeconomic violence involves where there's a denial or discrimination of opportunities or services based on gender. Where peradventure, I use this as an example. You go for a job interview, you're qualified. Say, we can't give you the job because you're a woman. We can't give you the job because you're a girl. We can't give you the job. It's discriminatory, and it's all forms of socio-economic violence, which is a type of gender-based violence. Where there's denial of an exercise of enjoyment of civil rights, as you know, call it civic rights, yes, social and economic, cultural and political rights. When these are denied, these are socio-economic violence. And mainly it is denied to women, it's denied to children because of one thing or the other, one reason or the other, which ought not to be. So whenever there is a deprivation, it's a socio-economic violence. Now, you now ask yourself, what are the causes of this gender-based violence? What are the causes? I understood by my research that gender-based violence is really rooted in discriminatory cultural beliefs. And for Nigeria, I also say there are some religious beliefs um, that encourage this gender-based violence. I'll get to that. You know, as I earlier said, that it is rooted in discriminatory cultural beliefs. Our attachment to culture, our attachment to the traditional way of life, it's part of the reasons why gender-based violence is still thriving in Nigeria. Especially with regards to men and women and girls, these traditional practices often, affect them the more. Factors like poverty, lack of education, lack of livelihood opportunities, impunity where people commit crimes and nothing happens to them. These are all causes of gender-based violence. Yes, yes, that's right. It's all part of it. You know. Now, gender-based violence is often have become a weapon of war. You see where these bandits go and kidnap girls, kidnap young men, young women, all for money. Yes, it's not a weapon of war. It's now a strategy of criminals. It is now the forefront in criminality. Yes, and it is intentionally targeted against terrorizing, inflicting fear, displacing and destroying communities, family structures, ethnic groups. Yes, that is what it is targeted. Now, in looking at the causes of gender-based violence, I'm going to break it down. I just mentioned a few of them. Now we're going to look at physical factors. There are physical factors that contribute to the growth of um, the sustainability of gender-based violence in Nigeria. One of them is physical factors, where there is lack of physical security. Anything can happen. That nobody is there, the security forces are not there. Even if they are there, they can't do anything. These are what causes people of like evil mind to come perpetrate crimes against women, against girls, against young men, and they say nothing will happen, and definitely nothing happens. So lack of physical security, adequate security is a challenge. These are the causes. When there's a breakout of ethnic war, whenever there is, you see there's issue, people utilize that opportunity to commit gender-based crime. When there's a breakout of ethnic wars, where there is issue of terrorism and banditry, which is a big challenge in Nigeria. Of recent, it's been so much that they have done so much. They killed a lot of people. They have displaced a lot of people. They have destroyed women, girls, boys, men. People have lost their life, have lost their family, loved ones, all to terrorism and banditry. So these are part of the physical factors that causes gender-based violence, especially in Nigeria. Because once there's a breakdown of law and order and the justice institution, these girls, these young women, these young boys, these men become vulnerable. That is why in most places in the northeast, during the evening time, they all move to a safer place to sleep. In the day, they return back and they don't sleep in there. Some people have not slept in their land of nativity for almost 5 years now, 6 years now, 7 years now. So people have not slept in their home for many no years now, many months. In the evening, they will leave to another safe place to stay. In the morning, they come back. So for how long are they going to continue living like this? Just like I mentioned earlier, that poverty is a cause, one of the causes of gender-based violence. But when people lack the basic needs of life, needs of existence, when people lack livelihood opportunity, when people lack food, water, shelter, it makes them to be exposed to gender-based violence. See the women begin to prostitute to make money, they are willing to be trafficked, all in a bid to have a good life. And they end up becoming sex slave, becoming they just lose it all in a bid to make a livelihood. So poverty drives women. See, just like I like explain about transactional survival sex, most women engage in it because they need food to eat. Their children need to eat. Now there are social and cultural factors that causes gender-based violence. When there is discrimination in terms of social, cultural, and religious laws. Yes, you know that in our country, some people still believe it is right for child marriage to happen. For them, it's the way of life. It's part of their culture. It's what has been happening, and it will continue to happen. But so we are saying no. Yeah, a child should not be. That she's not physically, mentally, emotionally matured enough to become a wife. So, social, cultural, religious laws when they are discriminatory, when they're not balanced, it causes gender-based violence. You know, when there are laws that marginalize people, discriminate between women and girls, so it's a cause, it's a root cause. Because once there is displacement, once there is collapse of family structure, it exposes women and girls to risks. Yes. Now we have the political, excuse me, we have the political and judicial barriers. This causes gender-based violence. Now, when there is lack of trust in our institutions, when there is lack of trust in the judicial sector, in the political terrain, when there is breakdown of law and order, when there is lack of trust on the law enforcement agencies, it discourages victims and survivors from seeking redress because they feel this is happening and it will happen again. Even if I complain, what will happen to nothing will happen. So I am of the firm opinion, or I believe that when there's a breakdown in trust, it affects the whole lot. So when people don't trust the political institutions, when people don't trust the judicial institutions to do the right thing, to come to their rescue, for them, to address their pain and to enable them seek redress. I tell you that it's a challenge. It's a challenge. Now, where there is lack of adequate and affordable legal representation, when people can afford legal representation, it's a challenge. It's a challenge. So that's part of the reforms are proposing that legal representation, you should be able to have people, organizations, NGOs that are willing to support people who are survivors, to get legal help get legal help because they need legal. Most of these people are scared to even say what happened to them because who will say who will fight for me? Now, when there is lack of adequate victim survivor witness protection, adequate victim survivor witness protection. If I expose these people, they will come after me. If I expose these people, they will come after me. No, when there is no security of life or there is a mechanism put in place to say, okay, even if you say what you saw or you expose them, you are safe. So lack of this institutional framework to protect the victim survivor witness is a challenge. It's one of those things that makes gender-based try because when it happens to A is not willing to say it. It happens to B cannot share it, and people are falling into the trap. It keeps happening. Inadequate legal framework. This is a big challenge. Inadequate legal framework is a big challenge because when we have adequate legal framework, knowing that when this happens, we have plethora of laws. We have, but when it is adequate, because we see that even when there is an act, domestication of those acts is a challenge in Nigeria because of cultural differences. State A domesticates, State B has refused to domesticate. So it's a challenge. It is a challenge. So these are things that give way for gender-based violence to thrive in Nigeria, which is not supposed to be. So, so there are also individual barriers that causes gender-based violence or that you know stands in the way to support the growth or the expansion of gender-based violence. Threat or fear of stigma. Most of these people that have undergone this violence, these survivors are afraid. People will be when I come out, people will not know me as that girl or that boy or that woman. So fear of stigmatization has made them to withdraw. They don't want to say that because of what people will say. They are afraid of isolation, they are afraid of discrimination, they are afraid of social exclusion. They know that if people know that I was involved, they will be looking at me, they won't want to associate with me. So these are individual barriers that have made some people, rather than expose some people that are behind these things, they keep quiet. Also the fear that if I expose this person, my life is not secure. The perpetrator might come back. Also the blame game. No, because we are in a country, we are in a society where people blame the victim rather than the perpetrator. So because people don't want to take the blame, like they will blame me for this, they will blame me for that. People are like, why do you go there? What took you there? What were you doing? How did it happen? So people are afraid of this blame game issue, the victim blaming syndrome. Yes, the victim blaming syndrome. So that have made them that rather than let me suck it in. Let me just keep calm and allow it to happen. Some people have been raped, some people have been assaulted by people around them and they cannot say it. Because they don't want to feel, they don't want people to look at them with that, it's not that one that was raped, or that fear, or the person, because they feel the person is more powerful than them, the person is willing to do more. Now another challenge in individual barrier here is lack of information. There are a lot of information out there. Most people lack access to this information. Uh, um, they lack access to these NGOs, these establishments that are ready to, provide the necessary things needed to reintegrate these people, to counsel them. Most people lack this information. They don't know that you can reach out to people, even through the power of social media, and help can come. Now, looking at the consequences of gender-based violence, this is a meaning. Looking at the consequences, you see that the consequences are broad. They have the short-term consequences and the long-term and fatal consequences. Most people have committed suicide because they are victims of gender-based violence. Yes, yes. Most people have committed suicide because were victims of gender-based violence. Issue of shock, issue of shock, issue of diseases. Most people have got some diseases because they were exposed to the infection, disability. Most people have been made for life. Drug abuse. Most people, because of what they've been exposed, they now rely on drugs. And before they know it, they have abused. They are now into drug abuse. Most people have sleeping disorder due to shock, fear, of what they were exposed to, what they experienced. They have sleeping disorder. Most of them have post-traumatic stress. For the women, you see miscarriages, unwanted pregnancy, pregnancy complications, depression, shame, self-hate. They begin to hate themselves. They now feel that low esteem thing begins to come up like, I'm not like others. I've been defiled. I'm not worthy. I'm this. I'm that. I'm that. You know, just like I always say, social stigma, loss of livelihood, no lack of economic dependency. So these are many more are the effects of gender-based violence. And you know that gender-based violence affects women, men, boys, girls of all ages. It's not really restricted to a particular age, or this particular background or a set of people, you know. But just like I earlier said, the women and girls are mostly the primary victims, even though, as I earlier said, the boys and the men are also targeted. I know the perpetrators of this violence are most times people in power, people who hold position of power, people in the position of control. Control might be maybe they go there with gun. You can't do anything, you know, both in the private, both in the public sphere. So these are mostly people, and you see, okay, in the issue of sexual violence, most of these people are familiar people, people that the victims know. They take like a brother or a sister, and they do the whole, they are they were abused or assaulted. So gender-based violence is a deep thing. It's it's problematic because both from the private or public angle. Now, you now ask, what has our country done to salvage this issue? Now, you know that our constitution, you know, um, generally provides issue of the fundamental right. You have right, to live, right of liberty. We have several rights as enshrined in the constitution, but specifically, as much as our constitution is there and that from the fundamental rights are there, specifically, we have the Violence Against Persons Prohibition Act. Violence Against Persons Prohibition Act. People call it VAP. The 2015. The law came into force in 2015. This instrument came after a lot of outcry by NGOs, by several associations, calling for the passing of this bill when it was at the National Assembly. And in 2015, on the 28th day of May 2015, it was signed into law by the president. This legislation, let's say, it was a huge success in the sense that it came at a point where everyone was on top of their body, like this has to be done. and it came. So it was a monumental instrument, revolutionizing the legal space with respect to gender-based violence in Nigeria. It has been domesticated by some states. This is the problem we have. Most states do not want to domesticate this law, this act, because of this cultural, religious beliefs and talking. Because when we remove culture, when we remove issue of some religious beliefs and cultural beliefs, the issue of gender-based violence will reduce in Nigeria. Most states, out of the 36 states, we have only 23 states have domesticated, you know, the violence against persons prohibition act in their own states. Now the question is, why are some states refusing to domesticate this law, this act? Why? Because for them it is against the cultural beliefs, it's against the religious beliefs and all of that, which ought not to be so, because the effect of gender-based violence robs some people of their lives. Because for me, I feel there's still need for civil societies, legislators, anybody that can raise your voice actively to scale up the advocacy for the domestication of this app all over Nigeria. If we really want to be successful in our quest, in our goal, in striving to see that gender violence or violence against um, you know gender-based violence is reduced to its minimal level, or if possible, eradicated in Nigeria. Now, this act came in 2015, and basically, let me read out violence in both private and public life, prohibit all forms of violence against persons, and to provide maximum protection and effective remedies for victims and punishment of offenders and related matters. This is just the little, let's say, a summary of the essence of the act. To eliminate violence against, persons, both private and public life, and to provide maximum protection and effective remedies for victims. Because most times, most of these victims have not been able to be reintegrated. They've not been able to, have effective remedies, and it's a big challenge. It's important that there is need for state level action, for each state to drive home this advocacy. That is where to get to the grassroots. That is where it makes so much sense. That is when people some people don't know there is something called the Violence Against Persons Prohibition Act of 2015. Most people do not know. They've not heard about it. They don't know what it contains. They don't know the punishment for offenders. They don't know, because the act is comprehensive. So people need to be aware of this act, and if it's domesticated, the law in their various states. Now, a lot of international bodies have been doing a good lot with respect to fighting this gender-based violence, like in the WHO, that's the World Health Organization. They've collaborated with the Federal Ministry of Health to adopt clinical protocol. There's clinical protocols on how to manage, these victims, how to manage intimate partner violence. Because the act also makes reference to where there's issue of marital rape and all of that. So the World Health Organization has done a lot by partnering with Federal Ministry of Health in providing clinical protocols on the management of victims, sex, and also victims of sexual violence, and also to develop the action plan for the health sector. What is the action plan? When someone comes and is a victim of gender-based violence, what are the steps to be taken state by state to ensure that this person fully recovers and is fully reintegrated back to the society as a better person? Also in the Northeast, they've done a lot. They've set up violence referral centers. They've gone to sensitize some communities because The setting up of gender-based violence reference centers is key. This is where people can come in to report issues. This is where people can, come in. This is where people can come in and report, incidents of violence, and action can be taken, after it has been reported. So it is important that more organizations, even if it's local organizations, do a lot, NGOs, individuals who can do anything they have to educate people, students about this. Most students should know about violence against persons prohibition act. It should be taught in school, should be part of the civic education, it should be part of the social studies for the junior ones and for even for the secondary school. They should know about the existence of this law. This act is very rich in its provision and it's covered most prevalent forms of violence in Nigeria, ranging from physical violence, sexual violence, psychological violence, and harmful traditional practices, socioeconomic violence, and the national that's NAPTI, the National Agency for the Prohibition of Trafficking in Persons, has been named as the service provider with respect of this act. Native dog, bulldog, dog, child trafficking, and the rest. So they are the service provider with respect to this act. You know, this act also recommends that even when there's a threat, when someone has threatened, or when there's an attempt to commit an offense, that again is also an offense. Yes, when someone really has a threat, when someone has attempted to just commit an offense, it provides the appropriate punishment for even the attempted, for even trying to attempt that offense, which is a normal in law. Because you see someone being jailed for or being convicted for attempted murder, mere conceiving it in your heart and attempting to commit the offense, it's already an offense itself. So, but there are challenges. This act, as comprehensive as it is, it still has some drawbacks. It still has some. So this is where we're not talk about the adequate legal framework. Now, this act is limited its application to the FCT. Only Abuja's FCT Abuja, that's the federal capital territory. And it is the High Court of FCT that is empowered to have jurisdiction to hear and grant any application with respect of under the act. It's limited its jurisdiction to FCT and the High Court of FCT. First of all, it limited its application, the application of the act to FCT, and it's the High Court of the FCT that will hear any application with respect to this. That's the reason why it should be investigated. Now, another drawback of this act is that it covers other offenses that also in like criminal procedural acts, in a criminal law legislations. It's more like surplus state. It's more like it covers this like duplicity of law. Most of the crimes, offenses as stipulated in the act are already covered in other criminal legislations that we have in Nigeria. So for the states that are yet to domesticate it, it is very important. That is why some NGOs are still shouting and advocating in any way we can to ensure that these states domesticate this so that they can enforce it in their states. Now, going to the question of what is the way forward? What is the way forward? I'll look at the way forward together with proactive measures that can be taken. It's important that the government, institutions, civil society, NGOs all take necessary legislative, administrative, judicial, and other measures to prevent, to investigate, and to punish, offenders of gender-based violence, whether at home, at the workplace, in the community, wherever. Because we have even seen instances where people that are supposed to protect these people at the IDP camps are the ones perpetrating some of this violence. Yes. So our government institutions must be able to, take all necessary steps to punish acts of violence, gender-based violence, and bring perpetrators to book. Now, it is important way forward to criminalize all acts of gender-based violence. It's important that the lives of people be treasured as provided by the Constitution. Violation of human rights is a big challenge. Especially issues of gender is a very critical issue. So there should be criminalization of all acts. It should not be handled with the levity or you know with this soft hand. No, all acts of gender-based violence should be criminalized. Now, adequate investigation is very important. This now brings for our law enforcement officers and officials. There should be in-depth investigation of alleged gender-based violence. It should be thoroughly, not media trial, not social media trial. There should be content, you know, deep investigation, so that when this person is charged to court, there's adequate evidence, there's all that is required to, ensure that this person serves, you know, the justice that is needed to him or her. So proper investigation is very important. But you see, most people have wriggled out of the court process, the court system due to lack of evidence. So our law enforcement officers must be trained, properly trained to safeguard evidence, to conduct investigation. Because sometimes, yes, the person did it, but there's no evidence to, because there was no proper investigation. Now, provision of adequate care support or victim survival health care system. When these victims are not properly taken care of, there is an issue. They relapse. They cannot fully, be integrated into the society. They are withdrawn. They are isolated. They grow up becoming difficult people. They don't have regard for humans again. They feel everyone that they feel the world is wicked and people should be treated with some, they just feel like, what is this life all about? Let me do whatever I can. Or they sometimes they don't talk to people, it affects them psychologically. And most of these people who are, will transfer all those aggressions to others. So there's need for proper supportive care to the victim, to the survivors, to right from how to counsel them, treat them, so that maybe there won't be any health issue. Now, an issue of counseling should be certified counselors, who know how to counsel people, who are not judgmental. Why were you there? What were you doing? No, 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 no. People who can counsel. These are certified counselors that, you know, that can counsel them and let them know the right that it happened to you doesn't mean you deserve it or that's how the world is. I'm going to counsel them so that they can still bring out the best in this one. Certified should be these people. Certified counselors should be at least in every health center in Nigeria. There should be a certified counselor. Most of our nurses should be also be trained to be counselors. Most of our health workers should be trained also to become health counselors, so that in the field, because most of the ones they are the ones that go to the field, to the local communities, they can function effectively in that direction. Um, Now, elimination of traditional practices. Elimination of traditional practices. Female genital mutilation and on the likes should be eliminated because these are cultural beliefs that are causing problems in our country. I know they are mostly targeted against women and girls to destroy their future, destroy their life, and their health. So it should be eradicated. It should be eradicated. And information helps in this eradication. If people do not know the importance of staying away, they will keep indulging. This belief that brings about discrimination against women, girls, and that's the sanction violence. Because for me, female genital mutilation sanctions violence. It sanctions it rather than it sanctions it. So ability to eradicate these practices will help is one of the way forward in the fight against gender-based violence in Nigeria. Now, empowerment of women. When women are empowered, things like, just like I told you, survival sex, transactional sex will reduce. Trafficking, because most of these people are deceived to say you're going to have a better life. Let's go to this country. So when women are empowered, when genders are empowered, they can provide for themselves. It will reduce. It has a great way of reducing gender-based violence. Yes, because when they are economically dependent, it's a challenge. Now our legal framework must be, revisited. As much as the BAP Act is comprehensive, but it still has its drawbacks, which is a challenge. It still has its drawbacks, which is a challenge. Because the lack of this jurisdiction by some states is depriving the members of those states you know, from assessing the benefits of the act. Now, I've talked about effective information, dissemination of information. People should know about the act. People should be taught. People should be, you know, uh, people should be taught to know the existence of their rights, access to organizations, NGOs that can help them in whatever they are going through, whatever violence they've been exposed to, provision of adequate care support system, psychological issue of counseling. Because when we have qualified counselors who counsel people, it's easier for them to come out from their trauma, easier for them to begin to see themselves with the right, whether they're seeing they are maybe they're not worth it. They are worthless people. Their esteem, the self-esteem will come up, and begin to become, they'll begin to, you know, exhibit the right character, behavior, of a good citizen. Now, I also think it's important that each state to have toll number, or communities should have free toll number that people can call when there is emergency or when there is issue of gender-based violence. Most people, because when these numbers are available, people can call. People that are free can call. Say this is what happened, though. At least, even if it could be anonymous, but people know something has happened in this vicinity. These things should be set up in different communities, in different states, so that you will just call. This is happening. You can come and investigate it. Please you have informed, because lack of information, a lot of things are happening that are even underreported. People do not know it's happening day in, day out. Nobody is aware. But when there are in channels, you can disseminate information or get back to the public or say this is happening to so place. So, or you call them to say, come, agencies, will be institutions, or any ministry, or even NAPTIP can just quick toll number you can call to say this is what is happening, and people are aware of it. Even children should be aware that this number, if I call this number and report this man or this uncle that is abusing me, they will come and pick him. They'll be so happy. Now, women, young girls, boys, men should be taught on how to defend themselves against abusers. This is very important. For the women to be trained, for the girls to be trained, for the boys to be trained, for the men to be trained on how to defend themselves against abusers, the abusers, the perpetrators of this violence is very important. It can help save them in situations where nobody is there. They can save themselves or fight. against their uh, um, abusers. More NGOs should take up this issue. More NGOs should take up this issue. Yes, there are people who are well to do that can do a lot. Even if it's pamphlets can be printed, shared in schools, children will read and understand what, oh, this is this. Okay, if I call this number and report this auntie or this uncle, they will come. They will know that there's something against known as gender-based violence. When this someone does this, it's not right. This information you should duplicate it in different languages so that people can be aware of the environment, they can be aware of whatever legal framework have been set up to help fight this gender-based violence. Our law enforcement officers must step up. Investigation is key. In punishing the offender, you must have evidence. No, you know, we'll go to court and get the person punished. That should be adequate evidence. So that is where the place of that's the place of investigation. When there is adequate investigation, when there is adequate investigation, then it helps justice to be served and like the perpetrator. Gender-based violence is a big issue. It's a big issue that has destroyed the lives of many people. Now, there should be the building of capacity in the justice sector, include our police officers, our prosecutors, our lawyers, our justices, all who handle this issue related to gender-based violence. There should be capacity training. There should be building of capacity to be able to have all it takes for them to work. They should have all it takes for them to work, and so that they can achieve the aim, which is eradication of gender-based violence in Nigeria. Whatever it is to put up, whatever structure, whatever facilities needed for them to function effectively should be put in place. Then, as individuals, we should be able to teach our loved ones, we should be able to teach our children, we should be able to teach our friends and colleagues and neighbors. This is this, this is this, this is this. If this happens, this is what is obtainable. You can, let people be aware there is something even called Violence Against Persons Prohibition Act. If you're not ready to go and download it, it's online, read it. What is the law saying? What is the punishment for this kind of offense? You even help. Because by the time you maybe talk to two people or three people, we have already passed the message. Our government have a lot to do, a whole lot. That's why the private sector can come in to support, individuals can come in to support, organizations can come in to support and collaborate within the international community, international organizations that are already in Nigeria fighting gender-based violence. So it's a war. It's a big challenge. It's not an easy thing, but I still believe that if we get it right, have the adequate legal framework, if we work on our law enforcement officers, if we disseminate right information, adequate information, we set up at least adequate care centers, support system. There should be gender-based violence referral centers across the 36 states, even in communities where people can go in to lodge complaints, where people can go in and stay as it is. If they can't go, there should be numbers they can call anywhere to report incidents. Incidents. So I think that we've done justice to this issue to an extent. To an extent, gender-based violence has destroyed a whole lot of lives. And with the issue of banditry and terrorism in Nigeria, it is getting worse by the day. A lot of people are exposed to it day in, day out. So we also pray that God will intervene in this country and help us to pull through. Because the more there are wars, the more people are exposed to gender-based violence. The more there are ethnic wars, the more there are attacks, people are exposed to gender-based violence. Our government must stand up to their responsibility to ensure to bring to an end terrorism, because terrorism is like the root cause. It brings about a whole lot. Because when there is terrorism in a community, in a state, people are displaced, there is breakdown of family structure, breakdown of community structure, people are exposed to violence, a whole lot happens. It's more like a cycle. When this happens, it flows to this, and this flows to this, and it keeps going. Yeah, I will believe that we will triumph. I believe that we can move forward. I believe that we can end is right, and I know that you and I have a role to play. Thank you for listening. Thank you. I hope you understood something, and you can go out there to share the message. Because gender-based violence, we all have roles to play to ensure that Nigeria is free. Nigeria is not a country, that Nigeria will not be a country that will be ravaged by gender-based violence. Thank you very much.